right, let me tell you something. I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Wendy Rihner, for those of you who don't know me. As of last month, I retired as an English professor from Delgado. And I was at Delgado for 30 years. And I will tell you that my younger students, because my quote unquote older students would never say anything like this, but my younger students called me a techno dinosaur. So I wore that badge proudly. And my Latino students would call me an anciana. For those of you who speak Spanish, you know what anciana is. So yes, I am a person who is not in favor of technology. But welcome. Again, my name is Wendy Rihner. I sit on the Orleans Audubon board as the education chair, so I have done outreach for Orleans Audubon. Jennifer Colson and I'm going to say teach present tense, because one day we're going to get back and be human again, and teach a beginning bird watching class. I've done native plant workshops at the library, at the Jefferson Parish Library, and all over. I'm also on the board of directors for the Native Plant Initiative of Greater New Orleans. I will have information about that organization a little later. So I want everyone to know that I am not an ornithologist by trade, a botanist by trade, or an entomologist by trade, and nor do I play them on television. I am just someone who is interested in native plants that bring the bugs, that bring the birds. So the most important thing here for me is the birds. I don't want to seem like I'm slighting bugs. I'm not, and I will admit that I am a recovered anti-insect kind of person. I am now a pro-insect person when I see how very important they are. So we're going to save questions for the end. So if anyone has questions, we're going to save those for the end. And Jennifer is, those of you who don't know Jennifer, she's the president of Orleans Audubon Society, and she is recording our webinar tonight. And again, I apologize for the problems, technology problems. That was my bad, because I just figured out how to unmute myself. And we're going to post it on jjaudubon.net. That is Orleans Audubon's website. And I think Jennifer's also going to send it around. So you have different ways of getting it if you would like it. And I will also try to go slowly enough so that things that you want to write down, you will be able to write down. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to give a shout out to Tammany Baumgarten, who is our president of the Native Plant Initiative of Greater New Orleans, because she said something a year ago that I think I will forever remember, and that is no one should advocate native plant snobbery. It's very important that people understand that, so I am in no way pushing that agenda. I just do think that it's very important that we take into consideration the value, ecological value of native plants. So I don't like it when people read screens. I'm not going to read the screen, but I want to let you know that Douglas Tallamy, who is, as I say, the guru, the god, the expert on natives, has really been a great teacher through his book, Bringing Nature Home. I know he's got a second book that's come out, but Bringing Nature Home is, if not the seminal, one of the seminal definitive books on native plants. Now, please understand also that I'm talking about the eastern part of the country. I know nothing about the western part of the country. I don't know if Douglas Tallamy is used over there as well, because it's, you know, totally different ecosystems and what have you. So a native plant, what is a native plant? Well, it's a plant that obviously occurs naturally in a given area. It can only, as Doug Tallamy says, it can only function as a true native if it has interacted with the community in which it grew. So all the forces that shape this plant. Okay, and I will read this last quote of his because I think it's pretty important. If instead we use plants that evolved with our local animal communities as the foundation of our landscapes, we may be able to save much of our biodiversity from extinction. And so I want us to think about biodiversity, meaning the scarlet tanagers or the swallowtail kites, the echinaceas, or the leaf hopper bugs, or whatever the case may be. Okay, so let's go through just a few USDA plant definitions so that we have an idea. And some of these definitions have a little bit of wiggle room, but for example, the invasive plant, it's a non-native. The USDA says it's a non-native. Some of us who have gardened with natives will beg to differ, but it's a non-native that can establish itself without much help from us. It disrupts plant communities. And President Bill Clinton in 1998 issued this presidential executive order that basically stated that an invasive non-native would cause economic or environmental harm. I want to put a caveat on that. And so the invasive, you all know here, that's posted is the water hyacinth. We know that what that is doing and the damage it's causing. However, I want to show you a native that I have learned a huge lesson about. This is a native plant. The middle picture you see here is Correll's false dragonhead. It's in the obedient plant family. It grows by rhizomes. And so last spring, naive as I was, I bought this plant from Pelican Greenhouse Plant Sales in the middle, and it blooms beautifully. The blooms are gorgeous. They last a while. Bees absolutely love it. In fact, last summer, I went to stick my nose in like a nincompoop, and I was eye to eye with a bee. That was not very fun. But then this spring, on the left-hand side, the left picture, you can see how this plant has grown. Now, I'm not sure if the concrete berm you see there is preventing anything, but a friend of mine on Facebook told me that within years, this plant could be growing out if I don't take proper care. So I may have to do that. So sometimes natives can be invasives. A naturalized plant is a plant that's not native, but it has, and I'm going off the page here, but it's a plant that has grown so long in an area. It's not native. It doesn't need us to grow or reproduce, survive in a place. And our best example in New Orleans is lantana. Lantana is not native. It's native to Mexico, other Central American countries, but it has literally taken over the New Orleans area, and yes, our pollinators like it, and that's one of the reasons why people use it. I have lantana. Remember, no native plant snobbery here, okay? And then the non-native plant is a plant that has been introduced either intentionally, like K. radia, which is a curse word in our yard because K. radia can take over everything. I believe K. radia was brought over from Japan to help with erosion control. Not a smart move, but we didn't know. And then, it can be intentionally brought, or I'm sorry, unintentionally brought over. Okay, going down the line here, so we're going to get into some technical terms here that I'm just learning myself. So a translocated plant, for example, those of you who may grow California poppies, those are native to California. They're not native to Louisiana. So it's been translocated. I am guilty of having and this is not bad by any stretch of the imagination. This is not a bad thing. I have translocated natives. I have the American basket flower. I grow by seed every January, December, January. I love it. Bees absolutely adore it, but I think as far south as the basket flower comes is Arkansas. Why does all of this matter? We'll get into it. The next term is really controversial. You could either say cultivar or native-are. And, you know, I don't mean controversial. I mean, it's got a lot of issues, discussion around it. So a native-are has been hybridized, okay? You've taken, for example, the middle picture here. No one in the United States of America has seen an echinacea that looks like that in the wild. This is an echinacea. It might be raspberry pom-pom or something. Pollinators are not going to visit that plant because there are too many impediments. Okay. Can someone mute themselves? I'm sorry, I'm hearing something. Is there someone who can mute?
Now take advantage of a very special offer when you use the promo.
Can someone who's got their television on mute themselves, please? Okay. Thank you very much. So this is a native-are. So what they've done is they selectively bred this plant so that it would make it more attractive. And that's one thing we're going to look at when we get to a discussion of native-ars, or you want to call them cultivars. And then a weed, obviously, is just something that's not valued. In Iowa, in Missouri, Helianthus anus, common sunflower, has been outlawed. You're not really supposed to grow these in heavily agricultural states because they can outcompete agricultural plants. Okay, so I told you I am a reformed anti-insect person, and I have learned the error of my ways. I absolutely am into bugs now. In fact, the other day before the storm hit, I was trying to catalog as many bee species as I could, and that's really not very easy. But I do like, if you don't know who E.O. Wilson is, you probably will want to look him up. I like what he says about insects being the little things that run the world, because they certainly do. And I like, I think I'd like to get a t-shirt with this. If human beings disappeared tomorrow, the world would go on with little change. But if invertebrates were to disappear, I doubt the human species could last more than a few months. So if you like your strawberry ice cream, or you like your whatever it is that you like, and that's pollinated, we know we need them. Insects bring in a lot of money, right? So there are estimates between $57–70 billion annually because of pollination, their pest control, dung burial, you know, the way they use dung, and also wildlife nutrition. And according to the Planet Bee Foundation, $9 billion, okay, due to insect pollination. However, it's not a happy picture. I think we're all aware of that. 40% of the world's insects are threatened with extinction. I'm sorry. The rusty-patched bumblebee, I don't know if any of you know that story, but it's a beautiful bee. It has that little rusty patch on it, but it's gone from 90% of its range. And my home state of Ohio, I have friends in Cleveland who have been feeding me some information. Ohio has lost more than 30%, I think it's about 33% of its butterfly species in the last 20 years. And that is due to a lot of this butterfly loss in agricultural states in the Midwest. Ohio is a big agricultural state. But if you don't love insects, birds certainly do. I wanted to share with you how difficult it was, because I don't know how many of us here tonight are bird watchers, but for many of us who are bird watchers, there are a few of us very lucky people who've been privileged to see parents feed their young. And I tried Googling images just so I can get an image in my mind of tanagers or buntings or grosbeaks with insects in their mouths, in their bills, and it wasn't very easy. Robins are a little different because we know robins eat, you know, insects and other things like that. And we also know, those of us who are bird watchers, that birds have specializations for feeding on insects. I did not know this, but one of my birding friends in Cleveland told me I had to look this up, that European starlings, I know it's all grown at once, but European starlings will insert their bill into the ground and open it up to make the hole bigger, so insects will be attracted to the hole. I've never heard of that. I don't know if that, maybe Jennifer can tell us if that's true or not. I don't know. So I have to verify that anyway. And I did not know that vermilion flycatchers love cockroaches. That I learned on my first trip to Tucson, Arizona. So that's kind of interesting, these things that we pick up along the way. So there was a study that Doug Tallamy is an entomology professor at Delaware, University of Delaware. And I believe Desiree Narango was one of his students at the time. And Mark, is it Mark Mara? Yeah, Mark Mara at the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center. These three people conducted the study in 2008 about how non-native plants in residential landscapes will affect insect-eating species. And because the chickadee is so common in so many neighborhoods and suburban areas, they selected that bird. And they measured the abundance of arthropods, not only the abundance, but the diversity. They measured avian diet. They measured the reproductive success of the young, the survival of the young and the parents, the survivability of the young and the parents. And I have to say that would be a really fascinating study to partake in. And it is online and you can find it if you simply Google Narango, Tallamy, and Mara, and I hope I'm pronouncing those two names correctly. So what did they discover? Well, they discovered that there is direct proof that ecosystems dominated by non-natives suffer a reduction not only in the different kinds, the diversity of insects, but in the abundance of insects. And they recommend no less than 30% of urban suburban gardens be non-native. So Tallamy says an ideal point is 70%. And I'm sure he understands that not everybody can reach that 70% biomass, but that's what he says is ideal. So if 70% of your yard is native, and I might add a footnote and maybe some nativars that have been proven to be successful in attracting pollinators, you then will get more birds. But again, the statistics vary between 70 and 80% of the lower 48 states. All the land is owned privately. And it's not only altered from this co-evolved ecosystem, but it's a totally new ecosystem now, so that we've created food deserts. So for those of you in the gardening, vegetable gardening community, and you know about food deserts, birds are suffering the same thing. So if you look at the picture on the top, again, I love peonies, folks. We have no native plant snobbery going on here. I love peonies. We can't grow them down here, but I grew up with them in Cleveland. My mother had like 4 or 5 different varieties blooming around the house. They're beautiful. They smell beautiful. But they don't offer much for the plant, for the bugs that the birds need to eat. So also Tallamy and et al. Found out that the non-native dominated yards also negatively impacted the urban adapted birds we all know about, the cardinals, the jays, the doves. And 310 species of North American birds prey extensively on caterpillars. So if the caterpillars don't have anything to eat because they don't know what to do with the peony, I was explaining this to my husband the other day, and I said, what if someone, 2 big hands from above, from the sky, picked you up and put you in a room and said, you are gonna eat iceberg lettuce for the rest of your life, and that's it. You can't have bib lettuce, you can't have spinach, you can't have anything else. You're gonna eat iceberg lettuce, and especially if you didn't know iceberg lettuce, okay? What would you feel like? So that's the problem. But Desiree Narango writes that we need a nuanced approach to restoring plant communities. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit, what this nuanced approach means when it comes to natives. So we know that birds work a lot. I don't think, and this whole eating like a bird is totally erroneous. And I think anyone who uses it, I always say, are you sure about that? You really want to say that she eats like a bird? So birds forage for insects a lot. Folks, I can't imagine doing anything for 18 hours. Can you imagine foraging for insects for 18 hours? Not me. So the University of Basel in Switzerland has just released its study that worldwide birds eat between 450 and 550 million bugs annually. That's 20 quadrillion bugs. Okay, so that's a lot of bugs. Another thing I find very interesting about bugs, having this newfound love of insects, is that because bugs, pound for pound, have as much protein as beef, many of our peoples across the globe eat them. Chapulines, if you've been to Oaxaca, I had the great privilege of going to Oaxaca a few years back, and we went to one of the mercados, and I dined on about 4 different varieties of chapulines. So it's very interesting. The Zapotec and the Mixtec Indians will go out in the morning and they'll collect the crickets and whatever, and they'll deleg them and de-wing them and keep, when they die, of course, and then they fry them up in butter and garlic and lemon, and they're very crunchy. In fact, if you go to, Johnny Sanchez on Canal Street, I don't know if it's open, but he does serve chapulines, but they're all broken up, I guess, to fit America's fear of eating insects, but they're pretty good, crunchy, good on a salad. So what triggers a seed or a fruit eater to go for protein? So think about this. From a little tiny hatchling to an adult, the bird needs nitrogen. So think about this. You try molting, and Jennifer can tell us all about how strenuous and arduous, chemically and physiologically for birds molting is. I know migration. I think of a little hummingbird migrating across the Gulf of Mexico, and I can hardly walk a mile without getting winded. You need protein to do these things. So what's really cool about evolution is that all of the insects have evolved to be most abundant during the nesting season, so that the parents can go and get the insects most abundantly during this time. Again, the proteins are needed. They find these in the insects. And I'm kind of getting into this, the fat bodies. And Jennifer, I was actually going to ask you about this, the fat bodies inside an insect's abdomen that have all these chemicals, the lipids and the amino acids and all these things. And that's what the birds need to develop its muscles, its tissue, and so forth and so on. Paul Ehrlich, who is a ornithologist, tells us that birds learn to eat insects in a variety of ways. And so one of the ways is they develop this search image, right? So if you think you've been fed this insect all along, or you know that this insect is delicious, or it's giving you what you need, and you have this search image of it, you're gonna constantly look for that. Also, parents can influence. It's like our parents. My mother fed me goose liver. I love goose liver. Some of your parents may never have fed you goose liver, so you don't even know what it is. So parents also influence a nestling's preference. Goose liver is just a Yankee version of pate. So what is all the fuss then about natives? And again, I hear Tammany in the back of my head all the time, but it is all about coevolution. Relationships take time, right? All relationships take time. So it's not just that a native plant has evolved or co-evolved with the Gulf Coast temperatures, the Gulf Coast's precipitation rates, or humidity, or soil composition, or lack of altitude, I should say. It's not just that. It's that it has, these plants have evolved. So plants came on first, came on the scene first, and then insects came on, and it's been this give and take ever since, which is fascinating. We know that insects have 3 ways of using plants, and Jennifer, if I mispronounce anything, you make sure that you please correct me. So we know that insects have antagonistic relationships with plants, you know, munching, munching, munching. They have commensalistic relationships where if a plant is, let's say a native, like maybe one of your annual natives is starting to age, like maybe your brown-eyed Susan is starting to age, an insect may go in and wrap itself in the leaf. It's not bothering the plant. And then the mutualistic, which we all know because of the pollinators, right? The bees and the butterflies and what have you. But the other thing is that non-native plants lack predators. They don't have a mutualistic relationship or an antagonistic relationship. And an antagonistic relationship is not good between your children, but it is good between plants and insects. And non-natives don't have that. And that's why they were brought over here. They were brought over here because I'm taking you away from your pests so that you'll grow in these great American gardens and you don't have any pests to worry about. So insects take evolutionary time spans, not our time spans. Doug Tallamy tells us that over millennium, over eons, insects have learned, oh, I'm going to eat this leaf, and I'm going to learn how to deal with the chemical defenses, because we know plants have chemical defenses. I'm going to learn how to not only absorb or metabolize that chemical defense of this plant, I'm going to learn how to excrete it and get rid of it. And that has taken a really long time. And so insects don't have a chance to do that with non-natives because it does take so long. He also tells us that 90% of all plant-eating insects are called specialists by scientists. So a friend of mine on Facebook was showing her passion vine and the little Gulf fritillary caterpillars on it. Well, that didn't come about 50 years ago after World War II or whatever. No, that came about so much longer. Okay, so insects have evolved alongside with certain lineages of plants. And yes, this is a, my little sister was down visiting from Cleveland and I introduced her to one of my friends in my garden. If you could have heard her shriek, in fact, you may have heard her shriek, but this is also what you get when you have insects and things in your gardens. And that's a blue lobelia that some of you probably already grow. Okay, so we have to look at plants like insects do. We have to look at a plant the way an insect does. So insects need plants for energy. Seed-eating insects are in the ground, so we don't see them that often, but they're very important. We know what they do for soil conditioning. Stems, leaves, roots, flowers give insects the carbs they need. I know carbs for us is such a bad word. It's not a bad word for me. I love carbs. They get amino acids and lipids. And what's really fascinating me now is the different theories about how insects know what a good host plant is. So again, like birds, insects develop these search images. We know that some plants give off chemicals and odors. Other insects know visual aspects. So if a plant has buds, like for example, if your passion vine has a lot of buds, well, to that caterpillar, it's, oh, that's a healthy plant. That's a really good, healthy plant. Butterflies can taste sugar on leaves. This is really interesting. Some insects, when they eat on something, can learn that the plant is losing its healthiness. It's not going to gain what it needs, and so they can reject that. So maybe if a plant is dying or is diseased or something, and then obviously trial and error. Okay, so you try certain plants. For example, we know bees like what we call floral constancy. So that if you have like If you have like 5 American basket flowers blooming, they could go to each one of those and not have to worry about going to another plant, and they learn, oh, I like this, I like this, I like this. And so that's what they are attracted to. This is by no means meant to be exhaustive or anything. It's just to show you some of the pollinator preferences that are out there. I did not know ants. Ants are not good pollinators, but they do a very minimal job at it. And what they like is sort of interesting. And bees, obviously, we know about. And I hope if you haven't looked at anything about these nectar guides that bees and wasps use, this ultraviolet light. So the nectaries at the bottom of the bloom, right? Bees have a beeline because of their ultraviolet light to that, where we don't have that ultraviolet light. Beetles is something I'm getting interested in. My neighbor has this gorgeous magnolia tree. I asked her the other day if I could climb it. I won't tell you what she said. I wanted to get in and look at some of the blooms to see the beetles that love these, because beetles are attracted to these bowl-shaped flowers like magnolias. And magnolias give off such a pleasant odor. I think it's pleasant. Okay, so what are the benefits of restoring your yard into an ecosystem? It's patriotic. America has a great natural legacy. America has gorgeous native plants. Southeastern Louisiana has beautiful native plants. Northern Louisiana has beautiful native plants. This is our legacy. This is what we have inherited. All the obvious things, you're going to use less water. You're going to have fewer weeds, especially if you plant a ground cover native like frog fruit. I know a friend of mine had texted me the day that she was very pleased with her frog fruit. It's called Texas Turkey Tangle Frog Fruit. That's the real name of it. It is native in parts of Louisiana, and it grows this nice little ground cover, and it prevents the growth of weeds. Let me say it helps prevent the growth of weeds. You will use less fertilizer because many natives don't like fertilizers, and you don't need to fertilize natives. Pesticides. I haven't used a pesticide in years. I want the insects, and I want the insects, the parasitic wasps, to come in. I want them to eat things that they normally would eat. Wildlife moves in. I was a national park ranger for 10 years at Jean Lafitte, and I had a boss, a supervisory boss there, who told me that in Southeast Louisiana, we need to change our idea of what wildlife is. Because so often when we hear wildlife, we think of the megafauna. I'm guilty of that many times, the grizzly bears, the caribou, whatever. Well, we know right here on the right side of your screen, that is our fauna that we're trying to attract here. Native plants require less work. If you live in a flood-prone area, you could build a rain garden to help with flood prevention and water pooling and things like that. In fact, I'm not going to go to the website here, but this Urban Conservancy, if you've never heard of them, and if you live in Orleans Parish, you can contact them, and I believe it's a very small amount, but they will pay you like $2.50 for you to rip up part of your yard and plant it with natives, or at least plants that absorb water. So check it out. It's urbanconservancy.org. It's a great organization. I don't think they work in Jefferson Parish, but I just wanted to show some of the things that I found in my yard. Okay, so obviously goldenrod, top is gonna, this is not my photograph because I have never had 4 monarchs on goldenrod in my yard at a time, but I do grow goldenrod, don't worry about it. Certain species aren't invasive. To the left of that is a bald-faced wasp. Nectaring on, because wasps need nectar, and it is nectaring on a rattlesnake master. And then obviously we know our milkweed bugs below that. I was squishing them for a while. That's how bad I was. I was squishing the milkweed bugs, and I don't do that anymore. To the right of the milkweed bugs on the little tiny green long-legged fly. Isn't that cool? That thing is cool. And we know the assassin bug beneath that. These are all juicy lunch items for birds in your yard. And then finally, to the left, this is sort of an issue I'm having trouble with emotionally, is climate change and our native plants. And the purple flower here, oh, my cursor's working. Now, how in the world did that happen? All right, sorry. So these native purple plants are blue vervain. It doesn't bloom until the fall. So for some reason, my plants are blooming now. And this is a Harold's cuckoo bee on it. I've never seen one of those before in my life. So kind of interesting there. So remember, start with what you have, keep what you have, add to it. There are so many ways that you can add natives to your garden without interrupting anything, without costing you an arm and a leg. And Talamy tells us, start with what you have, and that's the trees. So in his book, Bringing Nature Home, he gives a really great list of all the trees that attract Lepidoptera caterpillars, you know, butterflies and moths. And look at oaks. This is not just live oaks, all oaks. 534 species of caterpillars between butterflies and moths. And your scarlet tanagers prefer oaks, or so I've been told. Look at willows. We have the black willow. I know at Jean Lafitte and Barataria, black willows are blooming there. And the Viceroy butterfly relies on those. And I just gave you a rundown of some, but if you get his book and you look at the list, some of the trees we don't have in Louisiana, Southeast Louisiana, but it's very interesting. And again, remember, if you have a live oak tree in your yard, next to your yard, you're already at a great start. Just so that we know that native plants do what they're supposed to do, he gives us, Talamy gives us the 3 native plant superfoods. Solidago, the goldenrod. Remember, there are some species that are not invasive. Seaside goldenrod is not invasive. Rough-leaved goldenrod is not invasive. I have those and they're pretty much staying intact, but they are so, look at 115 caterpillars species, 11 bee species. Now this may be in Delaware, in his neck of the woods, but I can guarantee you'll get a lot of species. The aster family, Dr. Talamy would be upset with me because I put in a Stokes aster in the middle here, which is in the aster family, but it's not the aster he's thinking of, but it is native to Louisiana. This is a plant that has naturally occurred in Louisiana, and bees adore it, okay? And then the Helianthus family, the sunflower family, 73 caterpillar species. So that's pretty good. This is a swamp sunflower, which you can get at a variety of places. I know Delta Flora, which we'll talk about in a second, sells it. I know that the Pelican Greenhouse sell it. Okay, quickly about natives versus nativars. As I said, there is some controversy about what happens when you take a straight native, like for example, the common yarrow. When we take a common yarrow is white, and when we take it and we breed it with maybe a hybrid of a yarrow, and we get something that is not recognizable to a pollinator. And a good example of that are these 2 species here. I'm sorry, I don't know what the species is. I call it Coreopsis perinosensis because I got it from Perinos and I don't remember the cultivar species, or name rather. And you know you have a cultivar when it's in single quotation marks. So if it says Echinacea now you know what I'm trying to say, apricot dream, the apricot dream is going to be in single quotes. That's the cultivar. So a cultivar or a nativar is a plant variety that's been toyed with, that's been played with. And there's a woman you all want to get to know. Her name is Annie White, and she is a PhD in I don't think, it's not in botany, I can't exactly remember what it was, but she has done this study on the difference between straight natives and cultivars, and it's really very interesting. She found out that the further away we get from the color of the native plant, so let's say the purple of the echinacea, the coneflower, we all know, when you start breeding that plant for the maroons or the yellows or the oranges, it's lost a lot of its ecological benefits because its genetics have been so changed. So the reason why on your left side of the screen that I've posted this picture in my yard of the native is the tall Coreopsis lanceolata. Bees adore that. Bees come to that, but the low one, the nursery bought one, nothing goes to it. It's just pretty. I've done my own informal studies. I've noticed that the only thing that lands on it is dragonflies because it's a good landing platform. Okay. So the chart I've given you here, you can look at later, is a study done by the Chicago Botanic Garden called Budburst, and they're also studying the problems with nativars, cultivars, and natives. And but Annie White's study is very interesting. So she studied basically the typical ones like penstemons, phloxes, and heleniums. And because those plants have been so toyed with over the years to create new breeds. Okay, so these are just things I like to tell people what I can do, because sometimes I wake up every morning and say, oh my God, I can't believe I've actually been kind of successful at this. So all of these are naturally occurring in Louisiana. Your American beautyberry, which if you go to Barataria, you can see it in bloom, buttonbush, you know, and these are great pollinators. I don't think that these have been toyed with. I got the beautyberry from Louisiana growers. I got the buttonbush from Pelican Greenhouse. Gulf Coast penstemon came from the Pelican Greenhouse. So you can find plants that are native specifically to Louisiana. Partridge pea is a good one. We know that's a host plant for sulfurs. You want to have a variety of not only nectaring plants, but host plants for the insects. Okay. Also, I've been kind of successful. This top left hand is lemon bee balm. Bees absolutely adore it. There's the Stokes aster, which I should say is a hybrid. I think it's peachy, Miss Peachy or something like that, but bees still crave this. So obviously some of the ecological benefits have been kept. This rattlesnake master in the middle here, this white one, comes from the Native Plant Initiative's gardens at Big Lake. And if you haven't gone to see those native gardens, you should. They're at Big Lake, right where you rent the swans. It is a work in progress. Tammany Baumgarten and Nell Howard, our president and vice president respectively, are still working on it. Cardinal flower is not good for bees, or I think butterflies may come to it, but primarily it's hummingbird pollinated. Okay, and this is the basket flower on the far right, and that's why I love it. Look who's in it. All of these are not naturally occurring, so I have helped bring translocated plants to my garden, but every single one of these attracts pollinators, okay? Quickly about monarch butterflies, I know some of you already know this. I'm not going to pronounce this, but OE is a protozoa that's infecting caterpillars, monarch caterpillars, when it eats the Mexican milkweed. I understand that people have gone and planted this tropical milkweed and you don't want to dig it up because you spent money on it. If you can also maybe plant aquatic milkweed or swamp milkweed, those are natives. The orange, Asclepias tuberosa, does not do well in southern Louisiana. In fact, my friend in New York said a lot of people have trouble with that up there. So if you could avoid planting tropical, because, and it's a interesting study, the protozoa gets on the caterpillar. When the caterpillar goes to pupate, if it's successful, it may have smaller wings. It will not be able to migrate like they should. Also, if it isn't successful, it's going to turn black and gooey in the chrysalis, so you don't want that to happen. So let's go native if we can. Again, Delta Flora sells aquatic milkweed, and you don't have to have an aquatic area. Folks, I live in Metairie. I just water frequently, and my aquatic milkweed are doing fabulously. Pelican Greenhouse sells aquatic milkweed. In fact, today they sold out of their plant sale. Linda Alt, the butterfly lady at Barber Laboratories, she sells it. In fact, she sells a lot of butterfly specific plants. You might want to, and I'll give you her information. In fact, here it is. Delta Flora is in the 7th Ward off of Elysian Fields. I went today. My patch of Gaillardia is leaving me in botanical terms, so I'm restocking it. They are open Saturday, Sundays, and Tuesday afternoons. From what I understand, Delta Flora will be closing during August, and who can blame anyone for closing during August. Pelican Plant Sales, always a great place. Today they had their online plant sale. Some of you probably participated in that. Almost Eaten is in Maryville, Louisiana. He no longer does retail. He does mail order only. He does carry straight natives, and he also does carry nativars that are pretty close to the real deal. So here are some great sources for you. We don't live in Connecticut. We don't live in California. California has like 100 native plant societies, so native plants are a lot more available. But thanks to Delta Flora, thanks to Linda Alt, thanks to Dion and everyone over at Pelican, and John at Almost Eden, you can get plants for your garden. Some organizations you might want to think about. Obviously, I'm going to say Orleans Audubon first. If you are not a member, please join. I think that you will find it interesting. And when we get back to being human again, we have monthly programs, we have banquets. It really is a great group of people. You'll meet interesting people. We have field trips. Also, this presentation will be posted on our Gardening for Wildlife link on our website address, which is there. The Native Plants of Louisiana is a great organization to join. I would consider joining. I think it's $10 or $15. The Native Plant Initiative of Greater New Orleans, that I would like to give a shout out to, is a year old. It's doing very important things. You can go to Big Lake and look at a garden. You can also go to the Lighthouse. Nell Howard, our vice president, has worked very hard in planting out that garden at the Lighthouse with natives. She's also worked down with Jean Lafitte National Historical Park in the French Quarter with big planters. I'm not sure about Folsom. I don't know if it's still in existence, so I'm sorry if it's defunct. Cajun Prairie, if you call them and say, I'd like to come out and see the Cajun Prairie out in Lafayette, they're more than happy to show you. It's a great organization. Audubon, National Audubon Plants for Birds is the new mission. Well, I say new, it's several years old. This is a cool website. If you want to get on this website, you put in your zip code and it shoots out back to you a list of native plants that are good for your area. And then obviously the Xerces Society and the North American Butterfly Association are also two great organizations if you're interested in helping pollinators and butterflies and things like that. I think Native Plant Initiative, the membership is $20 a year. I'm sorry if I'm wrong about that, but it's worth it again. And so these are finally some sources that I think will help you, that have helped me. Doug Tallamy, obviously this was a seminal book, the book. And then our own Dr. Charles Allen in Louisiana. Certainly some of you may have even taken his classes, which I know many of us have complaints about COVID, but one of mine was that I had planned on taking one of his classes this spring. Out west in Louisiana, but this is a great book. Also, I lent it to somebody and I did not get it back. So if you're out there online and you have my book, can you please get it back to me? And then finally, not finally, but some of you may have come to the Native Plant Initiatives workshop in January before all this COVID stuff started. Thomas Rainier and Claudia West came. Claudia, something about the East Coast. Talamy is in Delaware, Claudia is in Maryland, Thomas is in Virginia. Thomas and Claudia came to New Orleans and put on a fantastic workshop. This is a great book. It's a beautiful book. You can get it on Amazon. I think you can get all these books on Amazon, actually. And then finally, those of you who have the wonderful privilege of knowing Bill Fontenot, what does he call himself? The Nature Dude. On our website, jjaudubon.net, is a PDF of his frugivorous birds and the fruiting plants they rely on. That is a PDF and there are quite a few pages, so I would just save it electronically. But it's there and it's a wonderful resource, and it works for both Eastern, Bill's out in Lafayette, but it works Lafayette area, but it works East and West Louisiana. And that is all I have for you today. So